All right, let's talk about the game that was canceled last week. Now we get a little more information, and it looks like by nature of the game being postponed, we now will potentially see both of these teams have their starting quarterbacks, which I think will at least make this game a little more interesting. Cam Newton returning to the team tomorrow, and it looks like Drew Lock could be active as well. So, should be a fun game, at least in terms of being able to see what these teams can do with their quarterbacks. But I do think the Patriots are definitely going to be the heavy favorites here. Right now, they're slated to win this game by 9.5 points. This is a 46.5 point over-under. In terms of where the Broncos have been strong, they've been a salve for quarterbacks, receivers, and tight ends, but they've been the best team at slowing down the run. Not good news for those of us that are wanting to trot Damien Harris out there. I don't know that the Patriots if they're an exception to this rule because of the fact that they have so many running backs, and that's just the way that their team runs, and the fact that their quarterback is also a good runner in his own right. So we'll see what the Broncos' run defense will most certainly be tested this week. On the Patriots side, they've been pretty good at stopping the run as well. Not nearly as good as slowing down the pass as we've seen in years past. I don't know if Stephon Gilmore will be off the COVID list. I don't believe so. So I do think that the Broncos will have at least some decent passing options here. So we'll talk about that. I'll basically leave it based on whether or not Stephon Gilmore plays. I think I had originally set my rankings assuming he was there, but now I'm remembering the fact that he's on the COVID list. Might need to adjust my rankings. So we'll give you some nuance when we talk about our starts here. Because originally I was saying you just want to start either Gordon or Lindsay. And at this point, I would say Gordon probably doesn't play. We saw this morning, the news broke that Melvin Gordon had received a DUI. We're expecting there to be some type of discipline from the league, potentially a game suspension or multi-game suspension. Phillip Lindsay practicing in full. Looks like he's recovered completely from that toe injury. So if Gordon is out and Lindsay is the main guy, I think you can start him up with confidence. If Gordon ends up playing, I would still play Gordon over Lindsay, even with this situation going on. He's just... I guess Lindsay's been the better running back over the course of the past couple years, but in the only week that we've seen both of them, Melvin Gordon looked better than Lindsay, at least in the touches that he got. So I'm just going to say I think Gordon is out this week, and I think you can play Lindsay as a result of Gordon missing time. Now, if Stephon Gilmore is out, you can start Jeudy, and you could probably talk me into starting Tim Patrick as well, but I do think that's chasing points from the last time we saw the Broncos. With Drew Lock, Drew Lock was pretty hyper-focused on Jeudy through the first 2 weeks, or at least the time that he played with them. I do believe that Drew Lock will be healthy for this game, and we should see him back. So start up Jeudy if Stephon Gilmore is out. If not, I'm just nervous that this is going to be like a game where the Patriots just absolutely steamroll over the Broncos. So I'm trying to avoid as many options as I can. But I think Jeudy at least makes an interesting start if Stephon Gilmore is out. On the Patriots side, we're going to fire up Cam Newton again, with the exception of the game against the Raiders. He's been a top 10 quarterback and should remain so. Julian Edelman had a pretty poor game against the Chiefs, but that was with Jarrett Stidham and Brian Hoyer playing. He had a really good start to the season with Cam Newton, so I'm going to fire him up, especially with the Broncos' pass defense being pretty poor. And Patriots defense, with the exception of the Ravens, probably make an argument for them being the best defense on the week. As we mentioned, the Broncos are really good at slowing down fantasy running backs, so that makes this a hard recommendation for either James White or Damien Harris. You might be in a situation where you have to start one of them. I'm not telling you cannot do it, because we saw Damien Harris look pretty good against the Chiefs defense, who have been okay against the run, and that was the first game back. And then James White could end up being better just by nature of him being used more in the passing game. So if I had to start one between these two guys, I would go James White, but you might be forced to start one or the other just based on bye weeks and roster needs. N'Keal Harry and Damire Byrd. Here's the real question. Damire Byrd had 10 targets, but that was with Brian Hoyer and Stidham. N'Keal Harry has scored a few touchdowns this year, but he hasn't looked good. Between these two guys, one of them will probably have a good fantasy day. I don't know who. I feel like it's a coin flip at this point. If you want to take a gamble there, I'd probably go Harry over Byrd, but I could see a world where Byrd ends up taking over at that wide receiver 2 spot for the Patriots going forward. Rex Burkhead, I think, is pretty much relegated as long as there's James White is back. Burkhead was seeing the passing volume that James White had when he was out for those few weeks. But as long as James White is healthy, it's going to be difficult to be trusting Rex Burkhead for much of anything at this point. That being said, like I mentioned, I have the Patriots pretty much steamrolling the Broncos. I got them winning 24-13.